Jobs and Business Development Committee for today, Wednesday, June 13th, 2012. I'm Councilmember Eric Garcetti. I am joined here in chambers by Councilmember Mitch Englander, or not chambers, in committee room by Councilmember Mitch Englander as well. We do not have any other members of the committee right now, but we'll go ahead and get started. Do we have any general public comment? No? Okay. Let's take up item number 1 then, please.
Item number 1 is a motion Garcetti Parks, CAO, CLA, and Office of Finance.
Oh, sorry, I want to take 3 first. I thought it was in reverse order, so let's take 3.
Number 3?
Yeah.
Item number 3 is a city attorney report and ordinance relative to adding section 21.171 to the Los Angeles Municipal Code to exempt the retail sale of new passenger motor vehicles from this article.
All right.
Previously assigned under Council File 09-1914-S11.
Thank you, and we do have a number of cards here. Why don't we actually start with the cards, and Councilmember Englander, if you'd like to come forward. Nice to have a co-author here. I think I know where you stand on this.
Completely changed my perspective. No. Actually, I just came to thank you for co-authoring this motion with me because it makes sense. And they say in business tax, if it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense. But this one is actually yes. Well, this one is if I can steal phrases from other council members, it's gold in the gutter. We have an opportunity. We've lost so many car dealers in the city of Los Angeles, which is a fantastic business structure and partner and corporate citizen in LA, but provides a tremendous tax base here. We're down to roughly 75 to 85 car dealers, where we used to have about 150 just a few years ago, and they're fleeing faster than they can put wheels on the ground. And because of that, we're losing tremendous tax and sales tax revenue to the city of Los Angeles. And so it makes sense. As you well know, we were there together in Beverly Hills. This was the best part about this, is we launched this effort and had a press conference out of our city in Beverly Hills because it was the idea of moving a Porsche dealer, which are now moving and setting up shop here in Los Angeles, where we're going to collect that revenue.
What are they going to be called?
They're going to be called Beverly Hills, Los Angeles. No, I think maybe it's the Anaheim Angels, Los Angeles, right. Beverly Hills Porsche dealer. No, but I don't know the official name of the dealership. Maybe you've got that information.
I think they can stay Beverly Hills, but they'll be in Westwood. So it's
in Westwood, Beverly Hills. Perfect. And so that is in itself. We're looking at about $3 million, I believe, in business taxes that auto dealers bring in, and the sales tax revenue alone will offset that so quickly that it'll allow those dealers to reinvest locally within their organization, expand or bring on additional personnel and employees. The other part of that is it's not just the car sales and the sales people on the floor that it employs, but it's all the ancillary services, all the auxiliary services. So exponentially, this is going to help our region tremendously in our city. And the types of work, the mechanics alone, and the types of jobs and benefits that brings, you can't just hire a mechanic like you used to that knows how to change an oil. You have to hire somebody with an engineering degree virtually to work on cars nowadays because of just to drive them, actually. Yeah. I think you need a degree to drive a car nowadays. But the types of jobs we'll bring is phenomenal. So I thank you so much, Mr. Garcetti, for your work and effort and leadership on this, and look forward to trying to persuade you into passing this with an aye vote.
Well, I appreciate that's a very compelling case you make. Thank you for inviting me to co-author it with you, and by that alone, I'm absolutely for it. I think the stats we calculated, we'd only need to bring 5 of those 95 car dealerships back that we've lost to generate enough in sales tax to cover everything we earn in the business tax today. So it's a lesson as we look at overall business tax for folks that are in the room today, that when you look at that, the loss of 166,000 jobs in the city of Los Angeles over the last 20 years, and when we get to budget time and we're figuring out what to cut, what positions to eliminate, what pensions we're looking at, all of that, it is in direct direct connection to those businesses that have fled, and we have to do something differently in a responsible way, but I think this is a very responsible way. So thank you for your leadership on this, and I do want to hear 2 other public speakers before we take a vote and ask the committee what they think. So I'll ask them to come forward. Darrell Holter, if you'd like to come forward from Downtown LA Auto Group.
Thank you for affording me the time.
Absolutely, anytime. If you want anything more after they're done as well. And Michael Gagan, if you'd like to come forward as well. who's... Good morning. Thank you for being here.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for allowing me to come here. I'm Darrell Holter, the Chief Executive Officer of the Chamis Group, family-owned business located here in Los Angeles. We have the oldest automobile dealership in Los Angeles, 92 years old, Felix Chevrolet. I'm also a member of the Board of Directors of the Greater LA New Car Dealers Association, and I wanted to really give you a picture of what Councilmember Engelländer talked about. If you look at a map, it's a very interesting map on where dealerships are located. You'll see them grouped around the city, away from the city, and in places like Cerritos and Glendale and Santa Monica and other places, grouped. And this is the result of their policy over many, many years to bring dealers from LA into their areas for sales tax revenue. I think the possibility that the council would eliminate the business tax on the new car sales has already paid some dividends to the city, helping existing dealerships expand, as we're doing with the $20 million expansion of our Mercedes-Benz operation on Figueroa, and the new dealerships that are moving in. And you know, as we look at it, we're persuaded that these developments will substantially increase the sales tax revenue derived from new car sales in the city, and more than offsetting any loss in revenue resulting from the elimination of the gross receipts tax on new car sales. And we tried to actually put together some numbers to try to, you know, explain that more. And so if you look at the data, from 2010, $2.9 billion in sales, $29 million in sales tax, and $3.6 million in business taxes. In 2011, our sales in California increased 9.9% over 2010. So if you project from those numbers, you would come up with $3.19 billion in sales, $31.9 million in sales tax, and $4 million in business taxes. And then if you stretch that over through 2012, based on what we're doing, you would come up with another amount that the growth in estimated sales tax revenue to the city would exceed the loss of estimated gross receipts tax by about $720,000. And it's also important to keep in mind that this provision applies to new car sales and not to the wholesale parts and other service activities, which we would continue to pay the business tax on. So, again, those numbers, Councilmember Labange. Hi.
We have a quorum, just for the record, with Councilmember Labange.
Thank you. And those numbers don't take into account what also was mentioned earlier, the other dealerships that are coming into LA. Beverly Hills BMW, Celebrity Honda reorganized, Keys Mercedes, Lexus of Woodland Hills, the Chrysler Fiat store down on Figueroa, and the new Kia store that's going to open on Figueroa too. So this is what we think. This is a good thing for our industry. We think it's a good thing for the city. We think it's a good thing for our employees. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much. I really appreciate your work on this. And Mr. Gagan?
Michael Gagan from Kendall Gagan, representing the Greater Los Angeles New Car Dealers Association. I'm simply here to answer any questions the committee may have.
Great. Well, thank you. With Mr. Labange and myself, we went over this a little bit. Mr. Labange talking about the 95 car dealers we've lost in the city of Los Angeles in the last 20 years, the remaining 75 to 85 that we have, and I would recommend and urge approval.
Absolutely. I've reviewed it and the notes, et cetera, so I second it.
All right. And with that, we will move it forward to council. Thank you very much, Mr. Engelländer, and thank you to those who have testified. We'll go ahead and approve the city attorney report and ordinance and forward that to the full council for implementation. Thank you. All right. Let's go to item number 2 real quick and knock it out, and then we'll save the big one for last.
Item number 2 is a city attorney report and ordinance relative to amending the Los Angeles Municipal Code, subsection A of section 21.30 to extend the new business tax exemption for business taxes. This was previously assigned under Council File 09-1914-S9.
All right. Good morning.
Good morning,
How are you?
Deputy City Attorney Dan Whitley.
Nice to see you.
Nice to be here.
So we have a report in the ordinance to extend the new business tax holiday for an additional 3 years. This would extend the sunset date to 2015. Is that correct?
That's correct. We have a draft ordinance. We've amended subsection A. The last line of the first paragraph of subsection A now would extend the exemption for businesses that commence operations between January 1st, 2010 and December 31st, 2015 as directed by council.
Okay. All right. Well, this is an easy one as well. Mr. Labange, any questions you have about extending the
Actually,
tax
we
holiday?
do still work with Water and Power to make sure that do we use some Water and Power information on their customers as far as on commercial customers? To make sure, does anyone in this room know that?
I don't have an answer to that.
Know that? Anybody here from the Office of Finance? Technical question, do we still work with Water and Power? They have a listing of 800 customers, of which a number of them are commercial customers, to make sure that everybody's paying taxes?
Yes, we do. We use a variety of city databases as well as outside databases.
And do we still walk the boulevards?
Yes, we do, sir.
Good, okay, thank you.
By the way, Ed Cabrera, Assistant Director, Office of Finance.
Thank you.
Anything you'd like to add to the extension?
Excuse me?
Anything you'd like to add to the extension?
No, unless there's some specific questions that the
I know
committee
that
has.
Mr. Parks had some questions. I know some of that you felt you couldn't necessarily give the analysis of it. We'll keep trying to work with seeing if we can get him that data.
Correct. I believe CAO was working on a report covering economic impact and factors. Office of Finance can speak to impacts to the business tax as far as the credits, but my understanding is CAO was working on a economic report.
Okay, great. We'll schedule that as soon
And
as we
one
get
other
that.
quick thing, I remember years ago when Carnation was in town, they were like the #1 taxpayer.
Carnation?
Carnation was, but they had all these dairies right up here by cornfields. Is it public record on who are the top taxpayers in Los Angeles, or is it confidential?
That would be
information?
confidential.
Right, okay, good, thank you.
You might be able to confidentially be briefed. Just
Oh,
kidding.
very good, all right.
All right, thank you. Let's go ahead and move the city attorney draft ordinance and report to council as well. And that'll take us to item number 1.
Item number 1 is a motion Garcetti Parks, CAO, CLA, Office of Finance, BTAC, and Blue Sky Consulting Group reports relative to elimination of the gross receipts tax in order to create jobs in the city of Los Angeles.
Okay. We do have one public speaker card. Jason, if you want to come forward, give you the courtesy of opening up.
Wow.
Good morning.
Good morning. Yes. Jason Elias, Regional Coordinator for SEIU Local 721. So what President Obama actually meant by saying the private sector is doing good, he actually meant private sector is doing probably better than the public sector, where we've lost 450,000 jobs throughout the nation. And absolutely, there's a connection between success of the private sector and success of the public sector. I want to go on record that SEIU supported the previous business tax elimination several years ago, and we thought it made sense. We're cautious about any changes to business tax at this time if it has an impact on the city budget. The city budget is stretched absolutely thin right now. Blue Sky's report, or one of their reports just recently said that although the revised proposal, is phased in over 15 years, that the increased output would not be sufficient to generate enough non-business tax revenue to offset the revenue losses to the city budget. So given that, absolutely, labor supports an economic development strategy that creates jobs, and we would actually stress good jobs in the city of Los Angeles. If we created living wage or prevailing wage jobs in LA to those businesses, we would absolutely consider, giving relief to those businesses that bring absolutely good jobs, as opposed to the Walmart poverty level jobs into the city of Los Angeles. So I just wanted to go on record as the buzzer goes off of saying that we want to be a part of this discussion, and we hope that it continues, but I think we need to be deliberative. I think we need to get good reports done to look at this, and we don't need to rush. This issue. There absolutely needs to be an economic development strategy, but I'm not so sure that the recommendations coming from BTAC are the ones that we should move forward to the full council.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And would you be willing to help convene some of a discussion with maybe some of the labor folks and BTAC officials? I mean, we've to talk about this, because I'd love to create that collaboration between us. And thank you for the testimony. I appreciate that. So here we are. It may seem rushed. It's probably, what are we now, 2 years in? 2.5 years in, with pretty robust and substantial analysis, both from Professor Swenson, then there's the Blue Sky, and then there was Milken analysis. So there's been actually 3 analyses of this, all 3 of which say this will clearly add to our local economy, one of which says that it may result in lower revenues for the city, and 2 of which say that it would boost revenues actually for the city. We would be able to hire more or bring more services into the city. So 2 out of 3 actually said the opposite of what the Blue Sky study said, and I think all of us at this table share very intimately the last thing we want to do is cut further services, eliminate more positions, especially after the last 2 or 3 years. So we've been doing it with that very, very careful eye. Just to lay out what we have done as this comes finally to some fruition, we are 166,000 jobs down, as I mentioned, 20 years after the LA riots, having added 800,000 people to the city of Los Angeles. In the county, we are up in people and up in jobs. So there's something sick and wrong here in the city of Los Angeles. As some of you know, I've been crisscrossing the city now, and I do not prompt anybody on this, but it is rare that I have any house party, meet and greet, talk to folks, and somebody doesn't bring up the gross receipts tax. A business person who's saying, I'm looking to move over the border to get to Glendale, to Calabasas. A property owner who says, I'm having a more difficult time renting out these spaces here than I am in other places. Companies that say they'd like to come to Los Angeles but won't. Manufacturers. I talked to a man whose wife had to lay off 350 people that she hired here in the city of Los Angeles 20 years earlier because manufacturing, which is quite expensive to move, finally said, we've got to move and get out of here. So we have seen, I think, more than anecdotal evidence. We have seen the success, too, of being able to boost our tax revenues while we, at the same time, had cut in the past. But clearly, it did not go very deep. It did not go far enough. And yet, we were able to do it in a way that was protective of the budget. And what I want to thank the folks from BTAC for is putting something forward that does protect our budget, that does have those trapdoors so that Jason's caution, my caution, other people's caution of, wait a second, we can't afford to blow any hole into this budget, even if it's a small one, is well protected through trapdoors that if revenues aren't there, we wouldn't be in a position to move forward and we would pause. That was the same sort of system that we set up with the CO and CLA in the previous round, and that is very intelligently put into this as well. We have 2 more speaker cards that have been handed to me, so before we get into our deliberation and a vote, I'd like to ask Doug Arsenault from VICA to come forward, and then Lloyd Greif, Chair of BTAC, as well, to step forward. Good morning.
Good morning.
All right, go ahead.
Good. Thank you, Councilman. I'm Doug Arsenault of the Valley Industry and Commerce Association, representing over 370 businesses in the city and surrounding areas. VICA is a founding member of the Axe the Tax Coalition, along with the Central City Association and the LA Area Chamber of Commerce. We'd like to thank BTAC and this committee for your tireless work in moving our city towards a tax structure that promotes job creation and economic growth. Despite supreme institutional pressures and 2 faulty reports commissioned by city bureaucrats, this committee has persevered by crafting a viable plan that consolidates rate categories and gradually reduces the gross receipts tax. While we favor an accelerated timeline or triggers that speed elimination, VICA understands the political realities and fear surrounding this issue. We applaud you for your brave recommendation to finally axe the tax. The gross receipts tax is a mechanism for a different time and a different Los Angeles. We urge your colleagues on the council to do as you have done and stand up for today's Angelinos when this proposal comes before them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doug. Appreciate it. Lloyd and Jessica Duboff as well? Okay. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Jessica Duboff. I'm here on behalf of the Los Angeles Area Chamber of Commerce and our 1,600 member organizations, many of which are small and medium-sized businesses. We want to thank BTAC for their hard work and the Jobs Committee for your thoughtful consideration of reforms to the business tax system. We strongly support BTAC's recommendations. In talking with our members, changes to the complex system with lowering of the gross receipts tax and the hope of eventual elimination is one of the strongest steps the city could take to maintain and expand our business base. We aren't just competing with neighboring countries or big cities, but with municipalities across the street. Calabasas, Glendale, and Burbank are all viable alternatives cited by businesses that wish to stay in the general region. In addition to reducing the high rates, simplifying the system would go a long way towards easing the frustrations of many businesses that have experienced struggles with correct classification. We look forward to continuing to work with the council on this as this proposal moves forward. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jessica. Lloyd Greif?
Good morning. I'm here. BTAC's available for any questions that might come up amongst the committee. There's 3 other members with me this morning. I just wanted to address a couple of things. I think, number one, we totally share concerns of labor. The proposal that we've made is a proposal that's designed to aid the city, which means aid all employers in the city, both public and private. And the big issue that we've got right now is that this business tax that we have is so disproportionately high. You look at competing jurisdictions like Santa Monica, which has got a thriving economic situation, and their catch-all rate is 1/4 of the city. Our catch-all rate is 0.507%. Santa Monica's is 0.125%. So when you look at that, the other sentiment that was expressed was one for a desire for, not the Walmart jobs, but the top quality jobs. So our stage one is addressing those top quality jobs, those jobs that are high-paying jobs, that are service-based jobs, that are jobs that, frankly, that's people that get turned out of our universities like UCLA and USC can take. And if you look at the rates, the way the rates are right now, the top 3 brackets, 7, 8, and 9, are 0.315, 0.356, and 0.507. Those are the jobs we're losing. Those are the service-based jobs that roughly account for 43% of the taxpayers, 59% of the revenues. Those are the very mobile jobs that are and can take up and leave and go across city lines and into other jurisdictions. And so we're looking at a situation where LA is in a competitive environment. LA is not an island unto itself. It's part of LA County. There are 87 other cities here that have effectively business taxes that are 1/10 the level that they are in this city. The recommendation we've made is not a recommendation that doesn't have a safety belt attached to it. We're not saying go at a high speed. We're saying go frankly, at a low speed, if you're thinking about 15 years. And there's a safety belt there so that the city can be protected. And those are triggers that effectively say, take a look and see if it's working. Is it generating the revenues that we anticipate it's going to generate? Just like you talked about earlier when you talked about the automotive, and you said, hey, we'll lose business tax, but we'll gain sales tax. What we're talking about here, number one, you're not going to lose business tax to the extent that you increase your business tax base over that 15-year period, because we don't talk about the business tax going away until the 15-year period is over. But we are talking about sales tax and property tax and utility fees and other sources of revenue that are driven by the level of economic activity. And as you correctly pointed out, committee chair, yes, there are 3 reports out there, 3 economic analyses that were commissioned over the last 2 years, one by USC, one by Blue Sky out of San Francisco, and then one that was pro bono by the Milken Institute. All 3 of them say, yes, if you reduce the business tax, you will increase levels of economic activity. And both Milken and Swenson say that, yes, you will increase it to the point of more than making up for what the loss will be. Blue Sky disagrees on what the proportion is, but we found, based on further research that we did, that there's some significant flaws in what Blue Sky did, and those have been pointed out by Milken. So I think we're all on the same boat here. We're all trying to row forward at the same time. We want what's good for the city, and we think the city needs to take this first step, which would be phase 1 of these 3 phases, to address, frankly, where the relief is really needed, which is the most portable businesses. You're in an internet-based economy where it's very easy for these businesses to address the Southern California marketplace, but do it not in Los Angeles. It's not an accident that Southern California is considered to be the automotive design capital of the world. All major automotive companies have their design operations here because of the creative capital located in this market. Not one of those automotive design entities that have been set up by all these major automotive companies is located within the city limits.
Except for Coda Automotive, but that's new. But you're right, the big guys are not.
Yeah, there's no BMW, there's no Honda, there's no nobody and you're talking about one that's new. I stand corrected.
No, that's just because I worked on it. I didn't mean for you to lose your momentum. We're very proud that they're on Fairfax by the 10 freeway.
Fair enough. But my point is, they're locating across city lines for a reason, and this is the reason. So we operate. We'd like to think that we operate. We're the city, and nobody else matters. But there's 87 other cities in this county that would just love to take our employees and our employers. And then, of course, there's other major metropolitan areas coast to coast that have huge markets that they serve, where major companies like Fortune 500 can locate, and they're not locating here.
Yep.
We need them here.
Yep.
We need to bring them back.
Thank you. I was just went to E3, our big show for video gaming that is here every year, and met a number of CEOs there, including the CEO of a company called Square Enix, or Enix. And when you drive now, come right off the freeway, right off the airport on the freeway on the 105, you'll see their headquarters just over the city borders in El Segundo. And when I said, what would it take to come to Los Angeles, he said, well, first of all, your city's business tax makes it a non-starter. Literally, there is a week that goes by where we don't look at that, and when we look at our declining revenues, I think there is a direct connection with that. The nice thing about the analysis that we had is all three analyses agreed that there would be immediate job impact and immediate boon to the local economy. Nobody disputed that, and quite significantly, anywhere from at least 100,000 new jobs to as many as about 130,000 jobs would be created by the elimination of the city's gross receipts tax. I do think BTAC has focused in very intelligently on that first and top tier taxes that do chase out the most mobile jobs in categories 7, 8, and 9. I'll just say on the record that I too think this is too slow. I think we all agree on that. I would favor a 5 or 10 year elimination. But any package that we put forward, of course, has to have the protections to the city's budget. And indeed, that is the CLA's recommendation to adopt the CO recommendation that talks about making sure that we have those protections in place. When we said that to BTAC, they came back with those protections of triggers and or review. When we're looking at this right now, we have a number of issues I think we need to address, and then I'd like to move something forward to the full council. We can take the 15-year plan that is before us and move the entire plan forward. The recommendation potentially to take the first third of that, which is for the next 5 years anyway, to give some confidence and some proof, and to really send the signal that LA is open for business on our way to eliminating altogether the gross receipts tax, is another way of moving that forward too. But I want to be very clear as chair, moving the first component forward is in no way saying that we wouldn't move the entire plan, but perhaps that's what folks will need to be able to give them that confidence. We also have the issue of a sunset date, which traditionally we've had the city attorney advise us if we don't put a sunset date in, that we can never bring back the previous rate. I also know that the flip side of that is you put a sunset date in and nobody trusts that we will actually keep permanent what we are reducing or eliminating. And as long as I think there's good triggers in there that allow folks to be able to have the confidence that further business tax reform won't be done unless there is concomitant rise in revenues. So that would reassure our budget minders, our city workers, our council members like myself who want to make sure we have a strong budget, that would be a kind of foolproof protection to allow that to happen. So in stage one, colleagues, what we have before us in years 1 to 5 is to consolidate 9 tax classes into 3, to reduce the top rate from up to 0.507, as Mr. Greif said, to 0.255 over 5 years in equal installments, and there'd be a review of revenues on an annual basis. We have also within that the ability to make sure that if the review shows us that we aren't getting revenues in, that we can pause and wait for either recovery in the economy or looking at recruiting those businesses to make sure they're coming here. One thing I am certain of, without tax reform today, we will be back in our budget committees not knowing what the cause is, but wondering why our revenues continue to shrink in this city. That's one thing I can guarantee. Even in better economic times, we'll say, why aren't we able to expand services? Why aren't we able to restore bodies that we've eliminated? Why aren't we able to do what is our purpose here in government, which is to produce good services for the people of LA? If I've ever been as certain about something over my 11 years here, it is that. And we've looked at talking to businesses. There, as Mr. Parks and others have pointed out, there are other reasons why people don't come to Los Angeles. It isn't the only reason, but it is perhaps the biggest driver that we do have here. So it would be my recommendation today, but I want to open up to colleagues to have any discussion, to move forward with the first 5 years of this, to forward the entire BTAC plan, though, for the council's consideration, but to recommend that the first 5 years move forward. We would look at making sure in the time between here and in council that we can continue those discussions. We'll make sure labor and BTAC are at the table together. We'll make sure that a lot of the community groups and businesses that are really the face of this are able to tell their stories, because we've had so many of those in here and before BTAC, and that folks can see that. But the issue of whether I would instruct that we have an annual, that we have an instruction for an annual review to analyze budgetary and revenue impact of the reform, as opposed to triggers, which would require an affirmative vote. We would have a review to make sure that it's continuing apace, and council could pause it at any point, at any moment. I'm also personally opposed to having a sunset date for this, because I do think that when we've done sunset dates, we lose the exact impact it's supposed to have, and people don't trust that it won't be coming back. Our extension right now of the sunset, of the amnesty for new businesses, for instance, is a good example of that. I think we would be able to attract more if people knew that that was permanent. And then, as I mentioned, we're going to look forward to having some of the voices from businesses in every single council district to really talk about what that impact is, not just on jobs and on families and on communities, but then the secondary impact of what that means to our city's budget and why we have seen those revenues steadily decline over time. The Office of Finance has done an extraordinarily good job in the midst of those declining revenues of having better compliance, and I want to thank them for their efforts. That has funded in some ways the past business tax reform that we've done. But I'd like to see, like we saw in Hollywood, our sales tax, our hotel tax, our utility tax, the rising property tax values finance this next round of business tax reform, so that we can look back and say that Los Angeles, it perhaps is one of the most business-friendly cities in the state, but at the very least, let's get to the middle of the pack soon, or else we're just going to be chasing our tail for a long time to come. So with that, Mr. LaBonge and Mr. Parks, if you have any questions.
I know everybody's in the business of getting this done. I second many of the things that you said, and I work closely with you in Hollywood and your leadership in Hollywood and turning it around, but this is a big issue. Yep. Because West Hollywood's right next door, Burbank's across the hill, adjacent to my district, Glendale adjacent to yours and mine. I think it's very important that we focus on this region. I also think there's triggers in here, a safety net, because I think a safety belt, you can still hit your head on the windshield. We don't want that. But a safety net would protect us. Shoulder harness, sorry, we got it. They're very good. Is important as we look at it. In 15 years, although you just mentioned 11 years, it does go by extremely fast. Mm-hmm. But the faster we could do this here, because people, in my experience, make a decision where they want to be, and they look at the bottom line, and if the bottom line is higher with a 9000 address or other Los Angeles address, they may make that. They may not be a homeboy like me who says LA is the only place to be, and they may say, I want to go some other place because that's it. And I think it's important, and it's key for us as we move into the next decade to be able to be very competitive to other regions. And there's a lot of great things about Los Angeles, but this could make this even greater. So I thank you for your leadership, Eric, and not to take any more time, but I do support this, especially with the variety of safety nets that are in there and to work it out. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Parks?
Yeah, I'm just going to repeat what I've said now for the last couple of years. I think there are three issues that are greatest concern, and I got in on the tail end of the comments by the union member here. But I think what we do not take into account is when lack of services come about because you've cut the budget, will be a real consideration by business. And we continue to stick entitlements in that make it more difficult for businesses to survive. They will continue to leave the city. I think what the fallacy in this analysis is that we keep saying things such as sales tax, property tax, utility tax are going to be populated to replace the business tax. but we keep ignoring the fact that we do not control those taxes, nor do we get all of them in our coffers. We have to rely on the state, we have to rely on a percentage, and in many instances, those taxes are also dwindling. And I think the issue, when we look at the April 18th report from the CAO, the most instructive part is that we've gone back and looked at the first $135 million of enacted tax relief. Yes, we did create about $645 million of business creation output, economic output, approximately 5,200 jobs, but the city only received $8.6 million from all of the population of those activities. So if our goal is to create better business environment in our surrounding region, then you could make a case for it. If you're talking about for the city of LA, it does not ring true that you're going to get that benefit for what you invest. And if I read the chart properly, in the first 5 years, you're talking about $126 million, very close to the $135 million we've already given away, and yet we got less than $10 million back. So I think that the issues are that when business tax represents 10% of our general fund, it's very, very difficult to see how confronting somewhere in the neighborhood of $70 to $80 million shortfall in this budget before it ever gets started from revenues that may not be realized, that we be embarking on a task of looking to get rid of $126 million over the next 5 years. For me, the most appropriate recommendation would be what the CAO came up with back on March 23rd that said, if you're going to go forward with this, then it should be financed with budget reductions or new revenue sources until there is direct experience that these projected makeup revenues are real. So that's I would not support that.
Sure. I just want to make a 1.2 when Mr. Park spoke about city services. What has happened in the transformation of all government is business improvement districts. I remember when the city used to sweep Hollywood Boulevard, and back in 1978, when we had Prop 13, there were 272 what they call maintenance laborers who were trucksters who drove three-wheel Cushman motorcycles who would sweep these boulevards. They were eliminated over time, and over time then we created with our city clerk's office these business improvement districts, which I think have been a very effective tool where they tax themselves and they get this service done. Downtown has a business improvement district. North Hollywood has a business improvement district. Throughout the city there's a variety. Hollywood. So there's a balance, and I think it's just a changing dynamic of governance that allows that to take place. So I wanted to make that point. Thank you.
Let me just make one other point. One thing, I think it's also a misnomer to refer to the Milken letter as a study. It would be important to me if we can get Blue Sky to analyze their letter as opposed to viewing it as a study, because all they did was read the original report and then turn around and make comments about it. And without Blue Sky looking at it, you will not get a analysis of whether they have identified appropriate points.
We can, and we've reached out. Milken has actually done some analysis that is technical analysis, not just anecdotal analysis. But respect very much, and Mr. Parks' work as our budget chair in very lean years was very important for the city, and it was my pleasure to work very closely with him on that. There are taxes that we absolutely do control: hotel, utility, others. Our share of property tax, it cannot be altered by the state no matter what they want to do. You know, my evidence in Hollywood when we were able to waive the gross receipts tax for entertainment companies and locate new headquarters like Nielsen, like TV Guide and others, we've seen in that area alone the biggest economic turnaround of any neighborhood in California, 475% increase over 1 decade. And so I do, we can agree to disagree, but on the interpretation of what the CO has asked, the new revenue sources are precisely what the VTAC plan, the latest one, has, which is essentially saying as new revenues come in, we are able to reduce this tax. Maybe the CAO was talking about taxing people anew, but that is, I think, that would defeat the whole purpose of trying to make this a more business-friendly area. What we're looking at is the new revenue sources from existing taxes as those increase to be able to continue to be more of a virtuous cycle as opposed to this race to the bottom that we have. Right now, it is crystal clear, it should be crystal clear to everybody, and there wasn't one report or analysis that didn't say doing this wouldn't produce significant jobs in a city that has lost 166,000 in the last 20 years, surrounded by cities that have gained jobs. What is the main factor, the main difference? It's not the housing market, it's not pollution, it's not crime, it's that we have a business tax that is the single highest in the county. Mr.
Yeah,
Parks,
I was just going to say, I think one of the things, every report reflects that they create jobs. None of them identify they're created in the city of Los Angeles. So I think that's the dilemma.
No, they are, just to correct the record there, they are specifically about the city of Los Angeles, all three reports. If we can have, and all three, when they testified here, did say it was the city of Los Angeles. Reducing our tax wouldn't create jobs over the city borders. It doesn't, I don't think that stands logical test necessarily. But they said that on the record. So I think we may have a 2-1 vote here, but I will move to instruct the city attorney to prepare and present an ordinance to collapse the business tax category 7, 8, and 9 into tax category 6 in equal installments over 5 years, and do that in line with the recommendations as BTAC has put forward, to be able to make sure that there is review of increased revenues to match those, so that we can only do that so that we have the protection for our city's budget and for certainly our public employees and others, to make sure that we can not only protect those services but hopefully expand them and bring that forward. We'll also ask, while we're not going to be drawing up the Stage 2 and Stage 3, I'd like to endorse the plan of Stage 2 and Stage 3 for the full elimination, but in the meantime be able to move forward with the ordinance for the first piece. And we'll make sure that we get folks together in the meantime, get different voices, and make sure people are kind of looking at that analysis together. We'll pull together some of the economists who have been looking at this as well, for anybody who have questions about the methodology, and we can dig into that. I think we've done a lot of talk about that in here, so we can even get tapes for people of past discussions in committee. And with that, I think we'll move forward as a 2-1 vote, and with a minority report recommending the language as the CAO or CLA recommended for the CO recommendation from March 23rd report. Okay.
Can I just thank BTAC, especially the great graduate of John Marshall High, who's right there.
Yes, thank you to BTAC, Office of Finance, CLA, CAO, and BTAC's really labored for a long time on this. Thank you so much for the great work you've done, and congratulations on moving this forward. Thank you.
See you,
okay. All right.
No, but I'm saying that none of the reports say, in fact, when you look at this report here, when you reflect that of the 135 million that we've already given away, 645 million in creation of business, 5,200 new jobs. The city only got 8.6 million. So these jobs and this money is in a region, not in the city.